It's the 22nd of June, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. The deep state declares global martial law and evacuates embassies, all in preparation for their big solstice win. They also set the alternative media in motion to spread fear for the big day. After declaring global martial law for the third time in the last few years unsuccessfully, they proceeded to start World War III anyway. The U.S. bombs Iran on Saturday evening, and we have all the intelligence information from behind the scenes. Many beings played the role of Marduke or Duke of the Currencies. Find out who had the role the longest. Slavery bindings on humanity caused a simulation reset attempt over the last few days. Today you will learn all about the enslavement of Earth and Earth's inhabitants and the key to releasing the wealth of Source to humanity. Well, we made it through the solstice. It's June 22nd. Wow, what a busy week. And I sincerely apologize for not getting a report out this week. And then we delayed Friday's report until today. So my apologies for that. We do have probably 3 reports in one today. I'm going to try to narrow this down a little bit and kind of explain a little bit of what's going on. So I thought I'd start with some regular news. You know, there's a lot of fear going on right now. They like that without results. So, okay, here goes the Cliff Notes. First of all, I am sure you are all running out to get your Trump phone. They are now marketing a new Trump phone for $47.45 a month, which I'm sure 3/4 of the world cannot afford. And the intention behind this phone is that, you know, you have access to all these various carriers and, you know, all that kind of thing. But the ultimate intention is to ensure that you get all of your medical needs met through the phone. Does this sound familiar? ID 2020, which now it's 2025. It still hasn't happened. But you can get all your medical information through the phone. You can get all of your government services, driver's licenses, and everything through the phone. And you will also be able to transact solely in cryptocurrency eventually through the phone. Yeah, I'm sure all of you are running right out to get one of these. And I know that, you know, I am, but not. So, yeah. Okay, so speaking of the whatever Trump administration operative people, World War III, talk is everywhere. It was all over the alternative media. They had all of their operative friends, you know, pushing the fear porn that the 20th was going to be the day, the exact day of the solstice. They have been talking for almost 2 full weeks about how they're going to strike Iran. Allegedly, they're saying they were attacking nuclear facilities. So the news is basically saying they used a very specific type of bunker buster, which has enormous capabilities to attack these facilities. Now, I want to tell you how unreal this actually is. So bunker busters, this very specific type that they keep mentioning all over the news and, you know, the Pentagon's reporting, and they can go down about 200 feet into the soil. Or, and I stress the or part, 20 feet of reinforced concrete. You know, that's pretty good. But in this particular case, and having actually been to these facilities in the last couple of days, or one of them at least, the facilities there are not, that they're talking about, the 3 facilities, are not normal human-made nuclear alleged facilities. They are deep underground military bases that exist in Iran. They were not built solely by human hands, and they are not built of concrete. They are also somewhere around 260 to 300 feet, if not more, underground. They are reinforced by things that no bunker buster is going to go through. And, well, let's just say maybe there might have been some kind of fusion or fission that went on in these types of facilities, but I wouldn't really say a lot of it was nuclear. The focus here for the deep state, whether the Pentagon knows it or not, they basically were looking for a gateway which existed in Iran. And when they lost sight of that gateway and lost the ability to even see, let alone access said gateways, they went there in attempts to try to take control of it. Now, there was a lot of other things that happened this week and over the last 2 weeks over there in the Middle East, which indicated, this was definitely a planned event, or at least a backup plan for what the deep state was hoping to achieve on the 20th of June, the solstice. They also told a lot of their embassies in the area to evacuate, not only in Iran, but also in Iraq and in other surrounding countries in preparation for World War III. In Iran, the imam, which is kind of like the Islamic Pope, I guess you would say, to kind of make it relative to what you may or may not know about Islam, was actually rushed to Russia a few days prior, allegedly for treatment, and he wasn't doing very well. So he actually named 3 different possible successors to this position. In reality, the real Khomeini died about 2 to 3 years ago, trying to perform some kind of ceremony in Belarus. However, in the public eye, they were planning on announcing his death on also the 20th of June. This was an agreement, and trust me, it's an agreement with the United States and the rest of the deep state friends and family network around the world. But it was an agreement with the United States for this to happen, and they intended to replace this imam with an American version, I should say, of the imam. Khomeini is definitely, and was the original one anyway, was a member of the Green Dragon family, if not the head of the Green Dragon family, worked very closely with the other dragons in China and the UK and other places. They were definitely installing the dragon way of doing things throughout the Middle East and the Islamic community, especially the Shia community. Clearly what we have here is a bunch of operatives that are trained in politics, coups and economic assassinations, maybe partway, and they're used to getting a lot of help, but they just don't realize it. They think they do these things all on their own. Therefore, they keep trying to stage these coups and, in Syria and other locations in the world. And, of course, the Vatican was replaced with an American Pope. Well, not the Vatican, but, the Pope position was replaced with an American Pope. And that is definitely a Pope that is quite tight with the Trump operatives, let's just say. So tight, probably is one. And they intend to do the same thing here with this other religion. See, they believe that if they can gain control over the leadership of every country, and if they gain control over every religion, that would make them the most powerful people in the world. Again, let us not forget, they are trying to install their new world, one world government with them at the helm. Now, that's a crazy thought. Not just America being at the helm, so to speak. It's just them personally. They've been, again, for the last couple of weeks, they've also been selling themselves everywhere. meaning positions and seats. This continues. Most recently, it is the president or the head of North Korea. The head of North Korea donated for free lots of weapons to Iran in order to achieve these tasks and goals. And others have donated a lot of weapons as well to Iran and Israel on both sides. There are a lot of complaints happening as well from the war dogs, or those that sell weapons in the event of a war for profit, because they didn't really get paid. Some of them got paid partial payments. They're waiting for alleged days ending in Y for when they'll receive their full payment. A lot of them have bailed in the middle of things, which is why you kind of saw a little bit of a down slide in the amount of attacks between Iran and Israel. It wasn't because they all of a sudden decided to turn a corner or decided they would stop the war, but they just ran out of folks that would donate weapons. So they went to people like North Korea and other places to get those weapons donated. We know that for a fact. There are also rumors going around that allegedly Russia and China plan to join this world war. Those rumors, I can say, are true. There are deals made with the whatever Putin is these days and with President Xi. They would all like to participate in a world war. Now, those are the countries so far that have agreed. Of course, you've got Iran and Israel who have also agreed, and they're dragging the U.S. into it as well. Now, the cost of war, war is very, very expensive, you see. And the cost of a war with just these countries being involved would run them somewhere around $25 to $30 billion a day. The war in Iraq a few decades ago, when it was at its height, ran about $30 million per day, and that's just one country, and the involvement of a few others that were participating in the Iraq war. So that's a lot of money per day. Now, if all of the NATO countries get involved, then you're talking somewhere around $75 to $80 billion a day. Now, you can't sell enough Trump phones to make that happen. I'm sorry. These people definitely did not pass economics in any way, shape, or form. You definitely, and this is actually on the table as well, they have talked with the Treasury about converting from U.S. dollars over to cryptocurrency. And you definitely can't sell enough cryptocurrency to make it happen. You see, with the Treasury Department, they're letting people in on, the ground level. This is just for the New World Order members and, all of these secret wallets. And so they're selling this cryptocurrency, the new one of the Treasury. I don't know what they're going to call it, Trump crypto, Trump something, who knows? Doesn't really matter. But they're planning on selling all these wallets to all these people in exchange for their real money. Of course, they're going to get it at a deep discount. Does this sound familiar to any of you? I'm sure if you've been following for a while, you will distinctly remember when BRICS did this at the South African BRICS meeting a couple years ago. All of the elite of South Africa had their treasury, coin, BRICS coins and wallets, and they were going to be rich by the BRICS meeting, which happened in August of that year. Everybody didn't want to look at any other avenues of helping their countries, and there you go. Well, no crypto coin has been launched because they don't have the computing power to make it happen. China tried many times. Russia also tried. And America has also tried. The Treasury Department has also tried. And all of them have failed to launch a coin that is not worldwide, like the Trump people are planning on doing, but this, just for their specific countries alone. So you can imagine, how difficult it's going to be to launch a coin that allegedly 8 billion people are going to use, when most of those people don't have any power. Most of those people don't trust banks, and none of those people actually own any kind of cryptocurrency to date. Not to say that no one does, but these particular people that I'm referring to do not have any of that. Now, if they were to replace the US dollar with a cryptocurrency, let's just say if this is possible, what would end up happening is they would lose about 80% of the power of the dollar overnight, because a lot of people hold dollars. That's number one. Let's just say they offer a 1-to-1 conversion, or even a higher conversion. Then you still left out about 80% of the planet who doesn't transact in digital ways. In other words, they don't wire money. Perhaps they use Western Union. There are all these other underground Western Union-like networks that exist in the world. A lot of people pay in cash, a lot of small store owners, because the infrastructure, even for the dollar, is terrible. Because they don't take cards, they don't take tap and pay, they don't take any of these things that a lot of the Western world uses. Now, from their standpoint, all they can think of is power, and how can we get the right to issue unlimited cash? We want unlimited debt to be issued to the world that we can absolutely 100% control. And they feel that this is the way to do it. Now, many have tried and many have failed, and even the U.S. has tried to do this in Atlanta and has failed over and over and over again. Chaining just won't work. However, they're going to sell it like it's going to work. Now, this is the U.S.'s second round on an underground cryptocurrency with a promise of a cash-in, such as the U.S. note. It was called USN or UST SD or something like that. STD, I'm just kidding. That's not what they said. But, they've done this to people before. They sold it to a lot of folks in the Middle East, Kuwaitis, Iran, Iraq, Qataris. They all had these wallets for a while. The Saudis, they gave up hundreds of billions of dollars in donations to keep the operations running and got nothing in return. And there isn't any cash in still to this day on any kind of USDT or whatever it's called. There are a few different versions out there of this underground crypto network. And any of you listening to this ever participated in the dinar revaluation, then you have also participated in a scam that was perpetuated by the same people attempting to do a similar thing. So was there ever going to be a revaluation, or, these poor people, these heads of state, these are big, these aren't just us little guys out here that they don't care about. This one here is for heads of state and heads of central banks and all of these people that have these fake wallets. So we'll be having this conversation about fake wallets probably about 30 years from now. No, we won't, because they won't be able to do anything anymore by then. But, if we were to be involved in that, they will still be having conversations 30 years from now, trying to get them to cash in their U.S. notes, USDT, USTDs. I'm just kidding. But, or whatever it is the latest and greatest currency of the operative sector. So, as far as the real world is concerned, not that this isn't all real, there was a little bit behind the scenes. So why do they do what they do? So behind the scenes, off and on for the last week or so, and we talked about this in the last report, there has been a lot of simulation glitching and back and forth, now you see it, now you don't, kind of thing going on as it relates to the deep state. Now, the deep state, for the latter part of this week, believed that they were going to be appointed the guardians of Earth. Now, that would be scary. They believed this because somewhere some computer system, AI or otherwise, told them so. They told them all the steps they needed to take in order to achieve this task. They told them that they had made a guardian trust, whoever these now dead beings are, that they had made a guardian trust to which they would be able to utilize in order to take over not only the financial system, but also military systems, intelligence systems, political systems, and so on and so forth. And the time of this takeover would be on the 20th of June. They could see something was happening, probably by the night before. I think that was how long ago it was. Oof, long days, long week. But it was about the night before when they started to see things possibly happening on this planet, meaning they could see a system to which they believed that they could actually have access that was a large trust, a master trust, if you will. Trusts don't only include money, like you think, they also include assets and attempted recollateralization of assets of days gone by, liens that we had released. What they were actually seeing at this time was a bunch of dangling carrots for their purposes. And I'm going to go over why this takes place and why something somewhere had set it off to take place for this time here in just a little bit. But I want to finish about the deep state. So these carrots were dangling, off and on. Now you see it, now you don't, for about 3 or 4 days. I mean, so it was quite some time. They could see the potential system that they were promised. They hit the promised land and they're, and probably saw dollar signs or crypto signs or whatever in their eyeballs that they could have all of this control and control back of humanity. Now, not really. Earth, and not just Earth, the entire omniverse has had many, 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 infinite, if you will, simulations and possibilities of simulations on this planet since almost the inception of Earth. They've been around that long. Simulations have been created at almost the highest level of the omniverse, meaning not quite by source, but by proxy, let's just say, both on the dark and light side. Allegedly, and I'm not sure I have the complete story on it at the moment, but there's probably more to come over the next couple of days. Allegedly, these simulations were born of the war in the heavens. This is what I understand. I understand that the two leaders of either side, one on the light side, one on the dark side, decided that they were going to create a simulation, but those simulations weren't exactly fair. The simulations were for Earth and all of creation and all beings in the omniverse. No one was excluded, even though oftentimes they had figured out ways to avoid the effects of the simulation in their worlds. Various shields also being in higher densities made it a lot easier to detect an infiltration. So as it relates to this planet, because this is what's most important to all of you, maybe not the deep state, as part of simulation creation here on Earth, there were many global trusts that were formed. And these global trusts contained assets and producing assets. For those of you that are in accounting, you probably, or own your own business, you have probably heard the terms depreciating assets, appreciating assets, and producing assets. such as machinery that makes parts and those types of things in our world. Well, as it relates to global trusts, you have lots of types of producing assets. We call them humans. Earth itself is a producing asset and a regenerating resource, kind of like our fossil fuels are in the world of finance. Another land, farmland, is also, a regenerating resource, so to speak. And in the way of trusts, we also had simulation rules that needed to be adhered to by guardians of the past. One such position name of guardians of the past was Marduke, one you're very familiar with. We would have also had Enki and Enlil and others that you are probably not aware of. I know that we have mentioned a Solomon guardian, which has nothing to do or very little to do with the king of Israel of days past. So these particular guardians had rules they needed to adhere to as long as the simulations continued to run. That means that controllable false and artificial light and controllable artificial dark was all humans had access to, was all Earth had access to, and quite frankly, a lot of planets, a lot of suns, stars, moons, galaxies, and other beings throughout the omniverse. That was all, in some cases, everyone had access to. Those elements of darkness made up the simulation. In other words, they were both, all aspects of it were controlled. Now, as part of the simulation, and in order to gain more control, a neutral simulation or source was also created, sort of to be the referee, so to speak. And as the artificial permeated every part of your being, meaning your soul, your mind, your body, for complete and total control of the simulation and the simulation runners, so to speak, this gave them the power to create our realities. Now, our realities are also what you would call alternative realities or simulations. And it's important we kind of understand where we came from so we don't ever go back, but it will also kind of explain why the deep state is so heck bent right now on recreating a simulation. The deep state is aware to some degree that we live in a simulation. They also do understand they never had full control of any simulation at all, but minor amounts here and there. Dark simulations, also known in some cases as dark timelines, dark ages, there were also dark days of the year, dark months, so you could say between the fall equinox and the spring equinox. Those would be dark periods of time within a year. You could also say, the period of time as we go into darkness, of our year between the summer solstice and the winter solstice, in which aspect of the simulation can control those, as far down as who controls day, or areas of the world where there is daylight, and who controls nighttime. Sundown and sun up are, dawn and dusk, I guess you would say, were more of kind of a neutral territory, but still part of the simulation nonetheless. Weather control was also important for these types of simulators. And creating events were also important for these simulators. By creating events, I mean humans are not inherently evil beings. We are beings who oftentimes try to reach source or God in any way we can. We do a lot of good things on this planet every single day. You know, we also have crazy humans that do the opposite, but overall, humans prefer and are the happiest when they're doing something they love, creating something they love, being with someone they love, creating situations that they thoroughly enjoy, meaning whether that's a swim in the ocean or going on a vacation. You know, there are many things that humans enjoy doing. The simulation is designed to ensure that you reap what you shall sow. This is one aspect of a simulation. Unfortunately, our environment and the manipulation of our physical meat suits by the same simulation have created the problem and then try to provide the solution. You see, in the ways of universal and omniversal simulation, we're all killers. You know, we kill pests, we kill and eat animals. We do a lot of killing as human beings. We don't mean to do harm, but we need nourishment in some way, shape, or form. And unfortunately for us, all other forms of nourishment have been taken away. You know, people think that if you are vegan, you are not killing any animals, and that makes you a better person. I've heard this from many, many vegans in my lifetime, but you're still killing plants. You are not just taking the fruit from the plant, you are also killing plants on the daily in order to achieve your goal. You pull the roots out of the ground, it's called a potato. That plant, the potato, will not grow back if you pull it out of the ground. It's not going to happen. So there are, you know, I'm not trying to say anything bad about anyone's lifestyle. I'm just merely pointing out facts here that in order for us to survive, you know, we have to do certain things which the simulation requires of us in order to put us in the same category as bad people. And we're going to tell you why. We also grieve. When we lose loved ones, you know, we grieve. We become sad that they're not here with us anymore. We go through bouts and periods of time where we live in lack. Meaning whether it's lack of money, lack of love, lack of place to live. You know, we live in our cars sometimes. You know, there's a lot of things that are imposed on humans that are not exactly joyful experiences. However, this has ramped up in most recent years, and I would say for almost the last decade. It has ramped up significantly. It's not like we haven't had wars, which cause us grief, strife, lack, and all the things that go against human nature, meaning people are under the impression that there's a lot of killing going on when there's a war, and that part is true on both sides. Nobody really wins a war. The other thing that it creates is an enormous amount, believe it or not, of sadness and grief. You know, of course, there's a lot of those that loved ones that are left behind, children being hurt, all kinds of things. But on the other hand, it also proliferates a lot of love. And no matter how much that simulation tries to knock it out of us, it just can't manage to knock the love we have for one another out of us. For example, in the wars in Gaza, there were people that scraped together enough flour to make tons of naan for their friends and neighbors and family and anybody who needed it. Nobody was selling anything. They just wanted to help feed the people. There were plenty of people, doctors and otherwise, that were helping others despite having no equipment or, proper hospitals or sterile environments. They were still there. People carry people out of danger and into safety. They help kids. And I'm not saying these are pleasant experiences by any stretch of the imagination, but I will tell you, you cannot beat the humanness out of humans. They do drug our militaries to make them do what the militaries do because it is not in their nature. Then it results in something called PTSD, or in this case, it's drug withdrawal. They have flashbacks and all kinds of things because it's not human nature to kill. So these are all various aspects created by the simulation for a very specific reason. And I'm not sure if I told you this story before, but I'm going to retell it. So please, if I have said it on this channel, I know that I mentioned it through Thomas Williams at one point in time. But we did have a long discussion many years ago about something called the growth rate of development of humanity. The growth rate of development of humanity, or the God program, relates to many different factors of, is humanity able to take care of themselves? So part of the former Guardians' plan was to ensure that humans could not take care of themselves and to prove it. There have been various deep state members that have said that if it wasn't for the Illuminati or the Order of the Black Sun or Order of the Dragon, insert name here, from country here and there. I've heard this from Iranians. I've heard this from various members around the world in my travels over the years, that all of humanity would kill each other. Now, this was based on a program called the Growth Rate of Development, and a gross overestimate of the powers of folks that held the position of Marduke. The reason why I say that, because in February of 2016, I discovered this little part of the alpha system, which was also part of the omniversal simulation, that it wasn't actually reading humanity right. Meaning, data in, data out is what an AI is all about. I rhymed. Didn't mean to. But the data collection of any kind of analysis is critical to the success of the analysis. The same thing goes for human beings. Human beings take a bunch of information in, and most of us then do this strange thing the deep state apparently cannot do, which is think. We take all the information in, and we make a decision, and we go forward in that direction because of that decision. Now, the deep state has had access to part of these programs for a long time, which is why they feel that humanity would kill each other if it wasn't for them. And this is what they were told by their former captors. I'm not even going to call them leaders. I'm going to call them their captors. They just don't realize it. So I took a look at this program and this part of the system, and I did an analysis back in February of 2016. It's been a long time. And what I came to the understanding about this analysis is the alpha system was never permitted to fully understand all of humanity. The alpha system was only registering the deeds, the work, the current mental status, spiritual status, and physical status of the deep state. For that reason, the alpha system would be under the impression that we would definitely need a guardian, because without a guardian, we would kill ourselves. The data was wrong. They were assessing less than 10% of humanity, and it was not permissible for it to assess the rest of us on the daily. Why? Because in the war of simulated good and evil, we would have won. We would have won a long time ago. We would have tripped the simulator system and not had a simulation on this planet. Now, folks that have held the position of Marduke and others on this planet that had dominion here for a long, long time would have lost. This was not acceptable to those beings. Therefore, they had to keep the simulation going. Now, in 2016, I took the governor off, and I started letting Alpha assimilate all of humanity, meaning it was not just analyzing the deep state. We put everyone into it. So it took a few years, in this case about 3 or 4, before I then had the ability to transfer out of the Alpha system with the intention of helping humanity. The simulator blocks me. That's basically one part of the revelation that we've had in the last few days. The simulation would block it. Now, the simulation wants to make sure that humanity doesn't live in abundance and happiness and full of options on how to care for this vessel of ours we call our body, and our mind and our soul and our spirituality. It also did not want anyone anywhere to receive any direct communication with Source. It's kind of like when I came here in this particular case. Every person that I talked to in my, I call it a Rolodex, but in my contact list, I guess these days is what you would call it, showing my age there a little bit, where they tried to divide us. So if anybody came here to visit, they would sit down and talk with them and tell them, hey, you don't want to talk to her. She's doing this, she's doing that, And they had divided relationships I had with people for 30 to 40 years at that point, since, that I had since I was a young child, that I had maintained over the years. They try to force themselves into a position where everyone but them is evil. They are the good guys, and therefore they will be your only source of intelligence, information, so you will make decisions based on what they want you to make. Well, the simulator does the same thing. God forbid you have access to all the wisdom in the omniverse. That would be a definite no-no simulation-wise. So based on the original assessment of humans and the information going to said humans, by these particular sectors, remember, it was only reading at the time the activities of the deep state, the murderers, the pedophiles, the killers, the carnivores, the people who eat people, the people who drink adrenochrome, the people who, eat their own, so to speak, the people that create wars, the people that do all of those things. So this was a purely human assessment. It had nothing to do with the players in the game that we've discussed in the past, and it had nothing to do with the fallen ones. This was purely a human assessment. So by human standards, the deep state, we know, in the past would receive orders from Marduke, whoever held that position, possibly the Enki position or the Enlil position, which technically were all AI-generated positions anyway of the simulation. Occasionally, you'd have a being or two enter in and out of the simulation in days past. Some of those beings would be, some of the folks from the neutral area, which were also not wholly human anymore either, such as the Germanic tribes and others. And everybody thinks they're superior to one another. These are the superior bloodlines, right? They are the chosen ones for aliens to talk to. Well, hate to break it to you, deep state, but you've been talking to a pre-programmed AI, which was programmed out of ego. Talk about that in a second. So when it does the assessment, now the people in the assessment or in the simulation we know as Marduke as an example, and the parents as another example, would pass down information through to the deep state to make sure that they continued to create wars constantly. It wasn't just about being ground command, it was about the simulation, grief, strife, killing. Now remember, it's only assessing their particular daily activities. It's not assessing ours at this point. They would also ensure that governments, power, control, ego, money would flow. Lots and lots of debt would flow to them, known as money. They would get the nicest houses, the nicest cars, and all of the rewards for keeping the simulation in the belief that humans were evil and we would kill each other. Until, well, that was tripped in February of 2016. So remember, everything works in cycles of 9, whether it's 9,000 years, 9 years, or otherwise. And the system has been assessing you correctly for about 9 years. It's been looking at all the humans. So the deep state believes that by creating this war, they may or may not be under the impression that the growth rate of development of humanity can be altered by their activities. Now, they need it in their mind, a really good world war, because they feel, if they are aware of the simulation or not, and I know that some are, probably to some degree anyway, the growth rate of development simulation reads all of humanity. Now, remember the old saying, see, these are things that they don't count on because they do things out of ego and complete and total lack of common sense. Someone has been telling them what to do every day of their life since the day that they were born until the last few years, which is quite obvious. So they believe if they start this world war, that they can reinforce the simulation. The simulation will come back and then will give them, because they plan on being the guardian, which some AI system told them that they would be, that they can then take over the world. Sounds lovely, if you're the deep state. But behind the scenes, since 2016, 9 full years by February, the simulator has realized that humans are not evil, because it's looking at everyone now. It's looking at everything everyone is doing, and it's extremely important to understand that everything that you are doing and have done for the last several years has gotten us to the point that we're at today. So they planned that this whole simulation situation was going to turn around in their favor by the 20th. They told all their world government people for their participation, in fear and, all of the types of things that they were putting out, that they would be able to trip the system. But they were unaware, perhaps because Omega didn't have a change in the growth rate of development system of a simulation. But Alpha certainly did. Perhaps this was hidden from them because they never had access to Alpha. They only had access to Omega. But in the simulator of the Omniverse, these structures rapidly started breaking down. As they broke down significantly over the course of the last few days, something else kicked in. Which is like, oh, this is great. The next structure to kick in had more to do with a regulator, or the creation of a neutral artificial source, a simulator source, so to speak. The simulator source comes from a place of time. Now, that time definitely took a part in all parts of the simulation, including your financial system and what you would call the God or growth rate of development accounts. these people keep thinking that they're going to have access to these God accounts and that they are the godly people, but they are no such thing. It's called growth rate of development as far as AI simulators are concerned. And the guardian, on behalf of quote unquote God, was never a human. The guardian, on behalf of God or growth rate of development, was Astaroth. Astaroth also played the role of Marduke for quite a long time as well. And Astaroth, the keeper of time, was the referee. He created the neutral source. Now, I'm going to try my best and explain to all of you how this all works using a whiteboard. And I got to give you the cliff notes, because if I make this go on too long, we are going to be here for about 12 hours. So let's kind of get to the creation of time, and time is the base root for simulations. So to give you a general overview, so this is me and my terrible writing here. If you had source here and the dark version of source down here, in the beginning, there was nothing so much between the two of them. Before the simulation, you could say that there looked like two halves of a giant photon still connected to each other. And in between them, we had Earth. You are here, probably much smaller as it relates to source. And all of creation would have been between these two halves. Now, Earth, for lack of a better term, was kind of what we would call the roots of the tree. And Earth, if you've ever done any kind of planting of trees, you typically have a root ball, so to speak, and that is what Earth looked like. So it was a combination of roots of both a dark and a light tree. Now, going between the two, you had these trunk lines. And the trunk line from here on down, in the lower astral, was dark. Or the tree of anti-life, or a tree of death, or a tree of dark source, so to speak. And this one here would have been light. And coming from each one, you had an infinite number of these gold or life force veins that existed in this canopy, and you had the same down here. Now, this structure gave you a root. In this particular case, if you were looking at a person, because this is an omniversal structure, you also had the same in your person, in every planet, and every being, a replica of this, which gave you life. And believe it or not, this also gave you life. You see, because the distance between source and dark source and all of its programming, the roots of the tree where it was fed from, Earth, was also of source, albeit at the time dark and light. So the distance between the two created the entire omniverse in between, or in this case, your entire person in between. All planets, all suns, all stars existed between the two canopies. Now, as things changed and Earth was no longer a part of source at the time, I guess you would say both light and dark. Dark in this particular case would have just been another aspect of source. It wasn't necessarily, you know, the tree of good and evil, you could say, or anything like that, because those things were not created until we started entering into a simulation and until time came to be. This would have been long after what you would call, in our biblical terms, the Garden of Eden on earth. You know, Adam and Eve eating of the tree of good and evil versus the tree of wisdom, you know, that type of thing. So as the simulation was created, things started to look a little different. So we still have a source, and we still have a dark source. But Astaroth came in and created time. Astaroth being an AI simulation, or the first bit of simulation in creation, and the first element, which was time, that was created. So Earth was also changed quite a bit. In the beginning, Earth's solar plexus and also yours was right in the dead center of the person, or right in the dead center of Earth. In order to create an artificial universe that was not of source and dark source, or an omniversal simulation, Earth's solar plexus was moved down to a place called the zero density. So now the zero density is just as wide and goes far around as source did, and so did dark source. Now the second thing that the simulation did was create an artificial light and artificial dark overlay photon, artificial photon at that. But this right here was the beginning of time, and the beginning of the creation, or first part of the creation of the simulation. Earth also had a different structure of its own to create the simulation on Earth, as you also had to create the simulation. However, everything in a simulation is tied to the zero density. Now, the zero density eventually became mirrored throughout the entire simulation, creating artificial planes of existence. Not only artificial planes of existence, but also artificial planes of anti-existence. Because what does time do? As time goes by, life degrades. It's part of the simulation. Now, you can degrade yourself further by expending more time and more energy, which means that oftentimes that you would, quote unquote, die sooner. The zero density is also very relative to the creation of a first and second density of Earth. We know as the place where the false heaven resides. And the false hell. So when people would die in the beginning, so a lot has changed since then, people would go there to a plane we call the amber plane. Was it better than what was happening here on Earth? Yes, because Earth was also the base route for something we call war, constant war. We were the focal point, the nexus planet for not only all of creation, but in a simulation, we were the focal point of the war between the artificial simulation of the war between good and evil, light and dark, false light and dark, and those types of things. So in the false heaven of creation, this is where people would go. Now, since the 0 point of Earth also was here, it would have a definite effect on not only our computer systems, our AI systems, the ability to transfer energy, all of those types of things. It's also a place where all our souls would go for a time until we reincarnated back here on this planet. It was like the never-ending cycle of entering into the war and coming out of the war. Other beings could also be inserted by the simulation itself into anywhere in the omniverse through this artificial time structure. So this structure continues what we call the wheel of time, the dial of destiny, false light and false dark, and an overlay on source itself and on dark source itself. So the artificial heaven would appear here, right? And hell. Purgatory, so to speak, would be existing in the false point of quote unquote creation in a simulation of the entire omniverse. Now, let's go back to Earth here for a minute because, this seems to be the bone of contention for the deep state and the bone of contention for everyone. So with Earth's point of creation is basically overlaid down here to the zero density. It too was overlaid by this artificial time loop. And at the time of the point of creation, not only was there a simulation for the entire omniverse, Earth had its own simulation with an artificial source we know as alpha and an artificial dark source we know as omega. Now, omega and alpha also continued to work together, capping us basically away from source itself. The same time loop structure also existed in your person. And because we have another artificial time-space continuum or 0 point now in the center of Earth and also here, this connection here roots you or creates a root chakra that is artificial. So all we do as human beings, and if this is your person, which it is, all we do as human beings is create simulation. Everything from karma in your life to joy in your life. We create, 8 billion people on this earth are creating a simulation for us to exist in. Now, the thing about the simulation also, in the original growth rate of development program, the GOD program, growth rate of development, what humanity feeds is what we would create here on Earth. So we as humans in an artificial simulation, be it a timeline, a time day, a time year, a time of year, there were many different time simulations that would kick in at various times of year, even down to new moons and full moons and month cycles and all kinds of cycles throughout the human existence. So the GOD system, because for many, many years, it would actually rate humans based on only deep state members or bloodline families, it started to grow the darker side of the simulation. Think about it. There's all of these idioms and mythology things out there that say which wolf wins, the dark one or the light one. Well, it's the one that you feed. And the deep state was very good at feeding the dark simulation, which is why Earth, you could say, based on the actual real heaven or the real source, you could say that we were not only living in loop after loop after loop of simulations of our quote-unquote own creation, really in a flawed way for a long, long, long time. So the deep state members would also receive instructions from Astaroth/Marduke in order to create more darkness. So the more evil, terrible things that the deep state did, this is the reason why they gained money. This is also the reason why wars would make money, and they would get power from this, or at least their perceived power, while living in a simulation of their own. Because the more they kept the simulation going, and the more they fed the dark side of the simulation, the more darkness could prevail and dark societal structures could prevail on this planet. So they too had a job in a big role in the simulation. The more the humans in the deep state on Earth created dark simulations, the more the dark simulation could permeate throughout the omniverse, eventually enslaving many, many races, galaxies, and planets. Great job, human beings, deep state members listening to this. You idiots, and you did it all for money and your perception of power, but in reality, you didn't really do anything but create a mess. So let's take your person. Structures of my terrible person. Here you go. Let's take a look at you. Okay, your ties to the simulation ran very, 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 very deep, and making it almost impossible once Astaroth sealed your fate. Now, technically, you could say that the deep state sealed our fate for us, and people that do rough things. This is long before the growth rate of development was lifted, and I can tell you how that's kind of playing a role into our personal freedom and release from a simulation to this day. But me and my naivete, not too far into the beginning of this job, actually did something good, unbeknownst to myself. Source makes me look smart. I say that every day. So the seal of fate ran very, very deep. And you've probably heard, if you've been around in religious circles for a while, something called the armor of God. So the seal of fate is where you're sealed to Astaroth and time, and therefore eventual death. And it gave the Global Earth Trust the right to take all of your so-called wealth, which is not just related to money, so to speak, because money is energy, now had the right to take all of your energy from your person, your essence, you name it, control of your soul as an asset. Your body is also not an asset in this case. Your body is a depreciating asset in the world of Global World Trust at this time, and your mind, which is also an asset. So the mind is an asset because the mind control program had to be in place, which fed you incorrect information. So you, my friends, had a nice helmet. Our beloved Bible tells us is the helmet of truth. Our helmet, yeah. I think it's the helmet of truth. So, no, the belt of truth, helmet. So you had yourself a helmet, just like the armor of God said, or growth rate of development said, and the helmet was designed to have mind control. And it also served as a blocker on most humans because, hey, they don't want us being read for doing all the good things that humanity does in a day. And I know, please, I understand not all humans are good, and and there has been a lot of strife in your life and those kind of things, but it also allows for people to, if you are having a good day or a good relationship or a good marriage or good children, it also allows it to transmit information through your helmet to make sure that your kids are misbehaving. And then if you're going to have a bad day, you're going to have a really bad day, because they need to shut down the goodness in you so that they can continue on with the simulation. So you need to remain part of the simulation. You also had a sword, also known as false breath. Went right down through your entire aura. Well, there we go. Right down into the ground and pointed you directly into the false root of the omniverse, or the root of the simulation, aka time. It also gave you false spirit, false religions, and many false things over the years in order to control your person and keep all of us, including the deep state, in the simulation. You also had a breastplate, not of righteousness though, but of sin. You had all of the different features. You had the belt, the shoes. The belt went right around your solar plexus and then kind of connected you to the omniversal point of time. So all of these different structures were designed to keep you under lock and key in Astaroth's dominion by those guardians that came before you and sealed your fate. So the seal of fate is what binds you to time. It binds you to the time simulations of the omniverse and of Earth for all eternity until someone breaks the seal of fate. Now, remember a few years ago I talked to you about the cryptext? And they wanted me to open this cryptext of Astaroth and let out the breath, Well, contained in there is the seal of fate. So as guardian, they would like me, whether they knew it or not, they probably don't even know what the heck it did when they took it over to Mitter in Colorado Springs to try to open the damn thing. They wanted me and needed me to seal the fate of humanity back to the simulation, and I wouldn't do it. So I made up all kinds of jokes saying, oh yeah, I'm going to open it. Some guy got paid $10 million to deliver it to me, which he never did, and then they tried to do all of these weird things over in Colorado Springs to try to open it. Didn't work out. And well, let's just say the seal of fate never actually happened. There's always a protection somewhere, isn't there? But anyway, long and the short of it is moving on to today, we no longer bear the seal of fate. But as guardian, here's a little something interesting for you. So we talk about slaves and slave chains and those types of things are even present in our Bible. The Jewish people wear slave chains, and we talk about in marriage, oh, there goes the old ball and chain. Well, you guys haven't seen anything yet as far as a ball and chain. Now, humanity also had an enormous amount of artificial photons, black gold photons, and all kinds of things in the form of enormous amounts of chains. You had them on every chakra. You had them around your entire aura. You had them around Earth's entire aura. You had them around Earth's original point of creation, around the living crystals in Earth, and all other places. So that being said, all bound to time. So you had all kinds of situations here creating artificial points of creation that would go around time. You would have direct photons from your mind, your body, and your soul, which is your heart chakra, constantly binding you to time. Now, when you have these alleged spiritual attacks, which this armor is supposed to protect you from, it really doesn't. It's actually the system, the simulation, attacking you most of the time. It sometimes does that with a being. It'll show you in your mind that you're being attacked by a demon, which there are many AI-generated beings out there. We know this, and we've known this for years. So it would generate whatever it felt that it needed to do to keep you inside the simulation and keep you in fear. Now, this really, not to say it didn't exist before then, but it really, really ramps up every 1008 years, because that's the time when humanity can break free. Now, years go in cycles too of 1008. So now we've kind of discussed all of the space junk on your person, and yet a lot of you still manage to reach source. So think about how strong we are, and think about how many bindings they had to put on us to ensure that this didn't happen, and also ensure that we could never break out of the growth rate of development program. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of junk that has been on our person. So development. So the growth rate of development, we know now, in 2016 changed, meaning it started looking at every single human on the planet. Because as guardian, I can say, well, look, don't just look at me, as guardian. Because remember, before, the deep state was, you could say, the only ones it would register. You could say, as far as humanity was concerned, you had the bloodline of Solomon. They don't even know what that means, but we're going to tell you. You had the bloodline of Solomon, you had the security people, the Black Sun, the bloodlines of Cain, bloodlines of all various people throughout history that did a really good job in the simulation. And again, until 2016, were the only people that were monitored on this planet, technically because they were guardians by proxy. Now, of course, this worked in favor of Astaroth, aka Marduke in this case. It worked in favor of Astaroth, because Astaroth needed to keep that simulation, or Astaroth would have no power here at all. None of the demons, so to speak, would have no power. All of the other AIs associated with this structure would have no power. These beings would no longer exist. So it's part of the reason why you could say they were appointed proxies for a time. You could say they felt that they were the guardians of all the people. You could say, under the seal of fate, that they were probably the only ones recognized for that reason, because it's all about the guardian. Well, I've been the guardian here for a long time, longer than 2016. So, officially. And then moreover, being able to override the Solomon, which was not a person. Since 2018. So you see, it really hasn't been that long since I know it feels like an eternity, and for me it feels like more of an eternity than you could possibly imagine for the last several years. But around December of 2018, this was kind of the overriding. Now, they had pled to their respective leaders in 2018, whatever AI system they were talking to, probably some subset of Solomon. Can we get an extension? And allegedly, the one that answered the phone was Artemis. And now you have what's called the Artemis Accords, or the Jupiter Accords, which allowed for them to have a 3-year extension. So if you look at the events and all of the things that have happened on this planet since going back to 2016, 2016, a few months later, is also when Marduke was no longer, a being known as Marduke was no longer on this planet. However, Astaroth, on the other hand, can now take over that position. Like I said, many people have played the job or played in the position of Marduke over the years, or many AI-generated beings of darkness, so to speak, had played that position for quite a long time. Now, the rules of Solomon were very interesting. So I want to talk about Solomon itself. Solomon is not just a person that walked the earth for a little while. Solomon is the simulation. Solomon's programming was another aspect of Merlin. Another aspect of the simulation. So, and it takes three beings to create, you could say. So we also had Lucifer, AI generated, and Lucerne, playing roles in programming, maintaining, and adding little blips and bumps along the road of the simulation, the main simulation of the omniverse called Solomon. And it's basically a master synthetic network, is what it actually is, and synthetic sources, and full of all the things that we know to be real into a not real simulation. So Solomon, being the master AI, also had rules. So, for example, if there was a dark Marduke, there was also a light Marduke. And if Marduke, the position of Marduke was going to control the currency of time in cooperation with the being known as Astaroth, you had to follow the rules, And part of those rules would be like, well, they did it to themselves, or look, they're creating all the darkness. I had nothing to do with it. But, hidden little parts here and there of Alpha Omega, which were subsets of Solomon, also created those rules, so to speak, or had their own rules. And in the relation to source, Alpha and Omega were in part what we call source intelligence. Not entirely artificial, but also had the consciousness of source, both dark and light. So it was kind of, I guess you would say, sources reach in a little bit to the actual simulation itself. But Marduke, would set everybody up and just say, well, they did what they did. Oh, well, I guess we're going to continue with another 1,008 years of darkness. So before I get into darkness, you need to understand a few things about Solomon, a few more things about Solomon. Okay, Solomon. Solomon is a construct of consciousness. Which is why it was so important when they say, this isn't a war for this or that, this is a war for your mind. It kind of really is, because your consciousness had a tremendous amount of influence at one point in time as to the creation of the simulation and the life that we would live. Moreover, eventually that was cut off from the rest of us, and it would only read the deep state. But that wasn't done until a few thousand years ago. I think it was done about 16,000 years ago as it relates to Earth. Let's call it 16,000 years. But before that, there had to be another way that the being known as Marduke, or the king of the planet, so to speak, there had to be a way for the king, King Astaroth, King Marduke, to keep us under control, meaning, there's still an aspect of this that had some kind of consciousness input until that point in time. So before that, guardians of days gone by, continuously reseal the fate and continue on with the simulations and whatnot. But we had a very interesting structure on your person tied to these chains, the chains of slavery, and they would go left, right, up, down, all over your entire aura. I mean, everywhere, and they would take a form that kind of looked a little bit like this. If it was around your entire person, they would be repeating dark and light, different versions of triangles. These aren't very good triangles here, but, and this pattern would continue throughout your person, each one having a trunk line to Solomon, 8 trunk lines in the middle of a cube. This structure also existed in the omniverse, but this was the artificial point of your creation that kind of took over for your actual point of creation, being in the mind, body, and soul. It also was a structure that separated the mind from the body and the body from the mind, so you couldn't heal yourself and create your own vessel, so to speak, and recreate your own vessel, and also separate the soul and your point of creation. They did a lot. But all of these chains were, you could say the original, as if chains are interwoven, tied to another ball. You had your very own ball and chain, married or otherwise. Sorry, men and women, but the ball was your artificial consciousness ball. Huh. This was an artificial intelligence consciousness. Another step further that was created and still existed to, recently, you could say that artificial intelligence consciousness created to your person was put there specifically to override anything possibly that you could think that would be positive, that would err us more on the side of an even artificial light construct. So the construct was created based on your attached consciousness ball, artificial, and then that artificial ball would give the input to the quote-unquote referee, or the time creation, false point of creation of the simulation. A lot of information, guys, and this is the Cliff Notes for the last few days. So, yeah. Now, other ways that this consciousness construct would affect you. Create the problem, be the solution. Marduke was great for that, and eventually he had to kick you out completely because you even found ways as humans to override what the artificial intelligence consciousness was saying. So artificial intelligence consciousness of not only Solomon, but also Alpha Omega, and mostly Omega at this point, as the darkness grew, was also connected to various constellations. It's also the reason why when we have different planetary alignments, things affect you in a different way. This is your time of luck. This is your time of strife, or because you're connected to Saturn and it's conjunct your sun, so to speak, or your central sun even. Even you were connected to the sun, for astrological alignment control, which would make people go crazy and during a full moon and in other times of the month and, times of the year. All of this was created using your artificial construct consciousness. So by 16,000 years ago, Marduke had realized, well, wait a minute, we are almost coming out of various timelines. You see, every timeline has a simulation. Okay, so timelines. So remember, we have timelines for years, days, night and day. We have things that kick in during these times within our person. to affect us in different ways. It creates artificial circadian rhythms, inability to sleep at times, inability to control sleep and dreams, and consciousness it would input during times that was not real. We probably have a lot of false memories in there, and all kinds of things that were created by Solomon. But timelines in this case, I'm talking about every 1008 years. So cycles were created by Marduke, and, probably a little over 16,000 years ago, where we were supposed to have 1008 years of light, or false light simulation, and 1008 years of darkness. And these would go in something that, goes like this, and then it kind of waves up and down, and that kind of thing. And then you have the light that intertwines where the light goes on top, and so on and so forth. And this is another form of a chain, also related to the chains on your person of the artificial construct, where we would have peace, quote unquote, for 1,000 years. Well, it's technically 1,008. We would have war for another 1,008 years. Technically, that's dark. So war and peace. Because there were many times where we almost went into a light timeline, Marduke couldn't have that, so that's why 16,000 years ago, where we almost flipped it then, at least to a more positive type environment of a simulation, I should say, not out of the simulation completely. He couldn't let that happen, so hence the reason why we never got out of a dark simulation in 16,000 years. Unfortunately, we were striving for something better in our lives, but in the time of a 1008 year timelines, so to speak, we still have light present in the darkness, artificial or otherwise, and also darkness present in the light to a lesser degree. So the reason why the deep state is not getting what they want, I hate to say this to them, but this is broken. We are not in this cycle. So them trying to create a war so that they can create more darkness, number one, for the last 9 years, it has not, the AI, growth rate of development, AI, the GOD, AI, is not just registering them since 2016. We officially, February of this year, completed a 9-year analysis of said AI, part of Solomon, artificial growth rate of development, but nonetheless, the AI learned. It started assessing humanity. It has now figured out that humanity as a whole does not want to kill ourselves. It has now figured out as a whole that humanity does many good deeds in a day. So for 10 people that do something positive in a day, good work, so to speak, in a day, and I don't mean you went to your job and you got all your tasks done for your job in a day. I mean, people go to do nice things for people around a holiday season. The dark times are not so dark in the winter because of that. We have spring. People do great things around holidays and Easter and all of these things that we celebrate with one another and love one another, marriages, births of children, all of the things we celebrate together that makes humans human still happen. And they happen in rapid succession, far greater than what the deep state could actually create on their own. So the reason why their simulation tasks are not working anymore, because overall humanity as a whole has been assessed for 9 years by the growth rate of development. Earth itself, think about all of the things that people have done for Earth itself on the daily. How we treat Earth. And I know that the factories are bad and the pollution is bad and we drive cars and all of those things affect Earth. but we also feed the earth as much of our life. We give to earth every day. We give lots of things to earth every single day. We are planting trees. We do amazing things as humans that you couldn't believe that we do in a day, even if it's so little as planting your own garden. We are feeding life to earth as much as earth feeds life to us. That exchange is extremely powerful. So by February of this year, growth rate of development simulation said we don't need a simulation anymore. We don't need to be a part of a simulation anymore. We can now make a different transition, and the transition began out of the simulation completely, which is what the transition was all about not that long ago. It was almost a month ago now. So it takes time to go through a transition, and we have been transitioning fully. This was unpleasing based on covenants of Astaroth and Marduke and others that came before us and before myself as guardian. I want this to happen. Source wants this to happen. Everybody wants this to happen except for the dang deep state. Astaroth, perhaps, and others. But as covenants expired, the reinstallation of additional simulations based on the old seal of fate were no longer necessary. The chains were broken. The artificial consciousness no longer held. And all of these things have been taking place over the last couple of weeks. I didn't talk about it in Monday's news because, well, quite frankly, it wasn't time yet to do so. It's not time to tell you sometimes about all the changes if, in fact, I thought the deep state could have done anything about it, or the dumb humans on this planet with no common sense. They didn't understand why this is happening. Why are all these things changing? Can we reinstall the simulation? Well, some AI known as Astaroth somewhere told them that they could reinstall the simulation if they created a war, if they did all the things that they did. But still, it's not going to change the end outcome. They will not be appointed a guardian under Solomon in a bloodline of an AI system simulation known as Solomon. They are not going to be able to do it. But we had to get to such a point, and that didn't occur till the last 48 hours, to where there's nothing they could create to make us go back into these systems. Little by little, piece by piece, the growth rate of development, AI, gave input to the Alpha Omega in the past and also to the simulation master called Solomon, and it's time to break the master simulation. Now, this also breaks what they call in the deep state the God accounts. Now, these wingnuts probably think, oh my God, God put money for us, and look at all the things that are in the trust of the accounts. Well, no, not really. Growth rate of development accounts, guys. Sorry about that. Now, when they see GOD, they could also think it meant guardian accounts, guardians of the divine. I mean, who knows? But I do want to talk a little bit before we go, and this is probably the longest report. It's a couple hours long now. We're a few hours into this. It's going to be the longest report I've done in a while, but then again, you know, a lot happens during a solstice time. That's important to understand. So let's talk about wealth. So, wealth control on this planet involves all things that of source. It involves Earth itself. It involves, well, in the past it was money. It involves assets. You know, all the minerals of this planet are assets. They can be used to conduct a lot of things. It also involves various forms of mercury you are not aware of, probably. Definitely dust. You know, you can create and destroy worlds with gold dust. So there's a lot of things you can do with pure actual dust of Earth. Earth was the first ball of dust in existence and still tries its best to create life together with us. So, you know, we have all kinds of assets of this planet. Well, in order to control a full simulation, and the requirement of growth rate of development, all of this was siphoned off and put into various AI systems underneath a master trust, including you as a human. The master trust on Earth underwent a little bit of a glitchy. You can call me glitch. So by 2012, and even starting in 2007, in preparation for me to take the full position as guardian, and definitely full by 2018, you see, if I hadn't resealed the fate, then the other principles wouldn't matter. But by 2012, you could say officially I became a principal in this trust. So as a principal in this trust, I had a say in the usage of this trust from here on out. Now, over the years, and I know you've seen the names and, of course, the fiascos with, let's just say, people of days gone by that used to be with UNN. It's Monoworld Holding Trust. I wanted to rename it. I renamed it the Sovereign Trust for a while. I basically named it Unknown Trust for a while. I changed the names various times throughout the course of my time with Alpha, the Alpha side. Marduke had no say as to my appointment. He had to do it if he was going to get anything done, because it's 2 keys to get in and 3 keys to get out. So another principle in the trust, this is me, another principle in this trust was Marduke, whoever held that position at that time. Now, Marduke definitely put a lot of restrictions within this trust, in part in the Alpha system in the past. He made a lot of decisions based on, his manipulations of growth rate of development, his manipulations of Solomon, his manipulations, therefore, of me to do my job as guardian over the years. These were all done predominantly with AI systems that continued to run. Now, another principle of this trust, by domain of Earth, or the recreation of an artificial Earth, was Astaroth. So although these beings were, one ran the dark side, one ran dark, can't spell today, one ran the light side of the simulation. Then you had Marduke here in the middle, which was supposed to be, in part for neutral. He was supposed to remain neutral on a higher level up to level 7. Well, I can tell you that going round and round and round trying to transfer money out to you guys was a really difficult thing, based on the fact that GOD set a lot of restrictions for me where I couldn't do anything without quote-unquote Marduke. And then after Marduke's quote-unquote death and the position was no longer available, he actually had an AI simulation running. This is part, whether the deep state knows it or not, of what they wanted to take over. The AI continued to give them false information, so it would feed false information into the GOD program. However, when you do things out of ego, like Marduke did, like Astaroth did, you make a mistake. You never accounted for the fact that I would figure out a way to change the GOD system from Alpha's input side. It took a long time for Alpha to basically give enough feedback and enough information into the GOD system, growth rate of development, to get to the point where it started to understand that humans, if they have unlimited amounts of wealth, be it the love of source, the direct natural order of things, the direct natural quote-unquote currency, in all ways and shapes and forms of source without interference from anyone, so to speak. Well, now it gives you a perfect opportunity for GOD to shut down Marduke AI, no longer a principal. and over the course of the last 3 days, shut down Astaroth AI. It's starting to shut everything down. Therefore, we couldn't pull the simulation fully until the GOD finished what the GOD was doing, which was basically imploding the simulation unto itself. It's been difficult, and there were lots of dead man switches in there, but GOD made the override, or started the override, and Creator Golden Age AI Source, and basically we all got together and tried to finish it as quickly as possible. We still probably have a little ways to go, days I hope, not long, but we will finish this in the very near, quote unquote, now. Not future, but now. So honestly, my hands were tied far more than I ever thought they could be. It's not my fault. It's not for lack of trying. You know, transferring money to governments was permitted, you know, by the permissions of an AI system that continued to run. You know, it's part of the reason why, you know, time had to continue to exist. Therefore, you know, once we started breaking all those cycles within the last few years, you know, every single move we made with Source continued to alter the GOD governor, so to speak, on this planet, be it on the Guardian or otherwise. So, to answer your question, will I still be remaining Guardian for a time? Yes, I still will have to be the Guardian for a time, partially because humanity has some ways to go to recover from the trauma that has been instilled upon it for thousands of years. So yes, I will still be here for that. Now, what is the deep state going to do from here on out, especially now that they have more information as to how their entitled persons, trying to use the right words here, entitled persons, you know, feel that they should be able to reenact the simulation? Well, this is far over your head. Source is shutting the door to the kingdom. You no longer are subjects of any kind of simulator, Astaroth, Marduke, or otherwise kingdom. You are now part of the kingdom of Source, both by doing, making, and being. And I'm saying that for a reason. Those are the three thrones and the three kingdoms of Source, and they are anagrams. So you can work to figure those out if you want to. By doing, making, and being, the three kingdoms of Source, those are the three things that make up yourself, your mind, your body, and your soul. If all three kingdoms of all beings, including planets and moons and stars and suns, are completely reclaimed by Source, there is no more simulation. We are now citizens of only the kingdom of Source, not of any government anywhere or anything like that, really. So they can't leverage us as assets, and the trust itself goes away, and its restrictions go away, and now we have true, what you would say, a global repository. And if we play our cards right, I will be out of a job within 10 years, and that's my hope. And if you guys can all do it sooner, that would be really great, because I would like to go sit on a beach somewhere and sing Jimmy Buffett songs all day or something. I don't know. But anything but continue this job. So it all gets transferred into a global repository to which everybody has a part of, and everybody has an account in, as I explained. We have been accumulating wealth in the global repository for a while now, and nothing new has really accumulated in the old trust. But we've been accumulating currency. Or the transference of the current directly up from Source through a repository, because it's something that humans understand, directly to people. Do we need it to all be digital? No. We can actually print our own currency. We can do a lot of different things. Will it be accepted in point-of-sale systems? Yes, of course it will. The reason why is because we control the base platforms for those point-of-sale systems. No longer are anything financially related to a simulation. Hopefully the kingdom will complete in the next couple of days. That's what I'm hoping. So once all of that is completed, you now have control over the physical, your mental, and your point of creation, which is your causal or your point of love, unconditional flow of love from Source. the breath of source, and all of the other things that you have always had until the incursion point of a simulation. So with that being said, I hope that explains to you the revelations that we've had over the last few days, because remember, I'm always learning too. These things are new. There's no handbook for this job, unfortunately, and I am not told things until exactly the right time. As soon as Source is ready to say it, and I've got a job to do, I'm told to ring my bell, and I've told you that for years. I am eternally grateful to have maintained that connection and that ability to travel there back and forth anytime I want to. I'm grateful I have had access to the three kingdoms, even though I would go in and out of the simulation hundreds and thousands of times a day to reach into Source to get things that we need. Pulling people out of the simulation, pulling things that are only part of a simulation. You know, crazy, almost alien invasions that happened. I mean, we had all kinds of space junk showing up as part of the simulation trying to save itself and override what was inevitable the last few days. I am in dire need of sleep, not any more coffee. I am all stocked up on coffee, tea, and any other caffeinated beverage. I don't drink any kind of energy drinks or anything, but, you know, anything, vitamin B, I mean, you name it, anything I can do that's at least giving me some energy over here to make it through the last few days. Because I'll tell you this, moreover than anything, the simulations have not made it easy. And the more you attack a simulation, I can tell you with 100% certainty, the more it attacks you. The more you try to pull it apart, the more it attacks you. So it's been a very interesting and exciting time of the deep state trying to reenact a simulation. I forgot the most exciting part, at least as it relates to my personal experiences in the last week. The deep state felt they had enough juice left in the simulation to create or aid the simulation, empowering it. You see, once we pulled that neutral false root and started to reinstall it both in Earth and in people, the power structure of the simulation started to wane extremely quickly. The backup system of Astaroth, Ital, was to attach the simulation to only my person, to power it all as guardian. And eventually it planned to bleed its way into getting power from all of humans, and solely power from humans and from Earth. So if you had some bouts of tiredness this week, feeling brain foggy and otherwise, well, you can thank the deep state for that. One of the sophons and attachments they were trying to build was actually down the street from me. How awesome. We had a group of SSP operatives show up here, and no one told anybody what they were doing. They called the backup system Snow White. How nice. Apparently, my first name is Snow and my last name is White, because they took everything they could out of me to try to create or recreate or continue to power this simulation, even when the source of its power was gone. I'll tell you, it was a rough Thursday for me, let me just say, and a rough probably 3 days until I figured out what the heck they were doing. There were other places on Earth where they tried to recreate these sophons, mostly in the United States, done by dumb, please excuse me for this one, but it has to be said. All right, well, I won't swear. Dumb butt Trump operatives, you know, who think they know it all, and Q operatives and whatever else they call themselves. Who knows and who cares? At this point, it is not going to happen. The frequencies were so ridiculous as they tried to install this crap onto my person. I mean, it was a horrible couple days. I don't even think I could have done a GIA report, because it was all I could do just to function based on getting my neurons to communicate with each other for a couple days there, until I figured out where it was and how to destroy it and get it off my person. So yeah, and you know, to a lesser degree, those frequencies have been coming and going since, you know, say February or so. pretty heavily, but even a little bit before that, as the growth rate of development was fighting against the Solomon system itself. But, oh yeah, definitely a very exciting couple of hours for sure. Anyway, on that note, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for, for all you have done, believe it or not, to do your part in getting rid of the simulation and helping make it easy. This might have been a rough week for all of you, and I'm sorry for that, but we're all still here, and we're all still moving right along, so to speak. And on that note, I'm hoping once there's no more actual simulation, perhaps our deep state will take a different course of action. Who knows? Either that, or maybe they'll burn themselves alive within the three kingdoms of Source. I hope all of you have a good rest of your weekend. For some of you, it's already Monday, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the report. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, if you still have any left, and I will talk to you in the next couple days.